Before we start, as a general reminder, I'd ask you to turn off your cell phones. Make sure that we don't have any uninvited interruptions. My name is Jay Gephardt, and I serve as Director of Bands and the Al G. Wright Chair of Purdue Bands and Orchestras. I'd like to welcome you to the Stayter Center for the Performing Arts, a beautiful outdoor amphitheater, which Al Wright opened almost 60 years ago. Al conducted many concerts on this stage throughout his career for Purdue University, and it's only fitting that we're here today to honor the life of our dear friend Al Wright. On behalf of my dear friend Gladys, who was married to her beloved for 67 years, and the entire family, I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. And to those who could not be in attendance, but who are watching the service live stream, I welcome you as well. I'm honored to stand before you today to conduct this service in honor of our beloved Al. When someone we love dies, this is a tremendous amount of sadness and grief, even when that loved one has lived such an amazing life of 104 years. Of course, we're here today to rejoice in remembering the life of Al Wright, to find comfort and peace, and to especially surround Gladys and Al's family with our love, our faith, and our prayers. I'd like to ask you to pray with me now. Almighty God, your love is boundless, and we ask you to wash over us with your unending mercy. We ask today for your strength, your peace, your comfort, and your love. We rejoice in your promises. In your mercy, turn the darkness of this day into a celebration of the life of our dearly beloved Al Wright. And help us turn our sorrow, his parting, into rejoicing of a life well lived. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. We meet here today to honor the life of Al Wright. We give thanks for his life, and we ask for comfort for his family and friends who now grieve the loss of their dear husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and our friend. For us, there is loss, grief, and pain. Every one of us here has been affected, perhaps in small ways or perhaps in transformative ones, by Al Wright and his life. His life mattered to us all. It's important for us to collectively acknowledge and accept that the world has fundamentally changed with his passing. Life is brief and death comes. We're all grieving, and life will not be the same, nor should it be. Together today, let's open our hearts and celebrate the life of Al Wright and the impact he had on all of us. Henry Scott Holland's writing entitled "Death is Nothing at All" does not shy away from the fact that death is real and that, yes, it separates us from those we love. However, it also emphasizes that if the love between you and that person is real, then it will always stay with you and change your own way of living. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you, and that old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval somewhere near you, just around the corner. All is well. Nothing is hurt. Nothing is lost. One brief moment and all will be as it was before. Now we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. Now I'd like to invite our dear friend Roy Johnson, former student and colleague and dear friend, to share his thoughts about Wright.
Thank you, Jane. It is my privilege to share some reflections about Al Wright's years as director of the museum in Washington. I hope my voice will come until I finish. Rather emotional day. When I was still in high school, starting to think about where I wanted to go to college to earn an engineering degree. My band director said that if I wanted to join a college band, I should look at Purdue University. It had a brand new director named Al Wright, who was making great strides with it. Shortly after that, I was listening to the City Service Band of America radio broadcast on NBC one Monday evening, as was my habit. And lo and behold, it was featuring the band's director, Paul Vale, serving as guest conductor with Al Wright and the Purdue Symphonic Band on national radio, no less. I loved what I heard and decided that Purdue was for me. After being admitted to Purdue, I came down on a spring Saturday and auditioned for a scholarship on clarinet with Robert Gember, the assistant director of bands at Purdue at that time. The audition went well, and afterward he took me into the main office to meet his boss, Al Wright. Even though I was still in high school, that was my first meeting with Al, an association which would last longer than anyone else's with Al while he was at Purdue. Little did I know what an impact he would have on my life. Al added many new features to the marching band with his rapid tempos, high marching steps, and so on. These changes were a radical departure from the strict military style that Al's predecessor, Paul Spots Emmerich, had maintained. Al was very sensitive to the feelings of band alumni from Spots' era, so he took great pains to publicize all the significant firsts for the band which had occurred under Spots' leadership. He also maintained a close friendship with Spots and invited him back on occasion to guest conductor. I vividly remember a homecoming of 1957 when I was playing clarinet in the block band. Al had Spots conduct the national anthem from a podium placed in the center of the field, not on the sideline. Spots held the final chord of the national anthem and held it until the crowd in the stands was going crazy. What a vivid memory Al had created for band members who had no idea who Spots was. Following Spots' death, Al and I went up to his lakeside home in Rochester, Indiana, and spent an entire day going through the vast collection of musical scores Spots had accumulated to decide which to bring back to the Purdue Band Music Library. It was a rather surreal experience. Al continued to increase the size of the All-American Marching Band giving rise to the band members themselves referring to it as the Marching Million, and creating a special third verse of Hail Purdue specifically for the band. At drills, each member of the band wore a cardboard marching number front and back for rehearsals, so that Al could call out criticisms by number and not by name to avoid embarrassing any given student. But he was a perfectionist and did not hesitate to call out someone, be it male or female. He particularly enjoyed targeting the majorette corps. Band members took it all in stride, though, and replacing the worn-out cardboard numbers was a full-time job for the operations staff of the band. Al had a keen instinct about the mood of the student body, and in particular, the students in the band. One of the common cheers at football games in the 50s and 60s was for the cheerleaders to ask the fans whether Purdue would beat whatever team we were playing that day. The response from the student body was always a resounding, "Hell yes!" Purdue's president, Frederick Hovey, thought this was inappropriate language for students at a major university, and said so in an editorial of Purdue's student newspaper, The Exponent. Of course, his plea had just the opposite effect. Marching band members took up that response and expanded it to "Hell yes, damn right, you bet." Al did not admonish the band members to drop that response, and the rest is history. It became one of the All-American Band's most cherished traditions, the band cheer, which continued to add words to reflect notable events in the band's history. Al Wright added many new features to the marching band, which also became new traditions. I'm sure you're familiar with many of them: the Golden Girl, the floating Purdue formation, a more active role in the shows with the big bass drum, picture formations, an expanded majorette corps, and additional solo twirler positions, the Girl in Black and the Silver Twins. Probably the most memorable dates back to 1966 with his creation of the I Am an American greeting in each pre-game show. But he also retained the military-style student officer corps because of the department's close historical ties with Purdue's ROTC program. He added a great deal of color and excitement to halftime shows here. I remember a trip to Ann Arbor for an appearance at the Purdue-Michigan football game. The conclusion of our halftime show was the finale to the 1812 overture. And to add to the visual effect, we obtained colored smoke bombs from the ROTC and set them off during the finale. The smoke filled the field in the stadium just as planned. Unfortunately, there was absolutely no wind, so the smoke just hung there. You could hardly see the Michigan marching band when they took the field for their show, much to the delight of the Purdue fans in attendance. He also expanded the number of groups in the Purdue Band's program, adding the variety band, a big band style group that was the springboard for today's fine jazz program. Also added were two service organizations, Captain Psi, the National Honorary Band Fraternity in 1956, and probably the Signet of the National Honorary Band Sorority in 1959. Al was a genius at public relations, finding ways to spread the word nationally and internationally about the high quality of his programs at Purdue. He rapidly expanded the concert bands, attracting outstanding musicians, several of whom later went on to hold key positions in major symphony orchestras. When asked why he came to a university that had a school of music, Al would say there is no substitute for intelligence. Students who have the intelligence to master Purdue's technical and scientific programs also have the skills to be fine musicians. He brought in top-name guest conductors to conduct the symphonic band for his concerts. Composer Freddie Rodway, Isaac Solomon, conductor of the Indianapolis Symphony, Arthur Fiedler, conductor of the famed Boston Pops, band composers Henry Fillmore and Carl King, Commander Charles Brenner of the U.S. Navy Band, Colonel Arnold Gabriel of the U.S. Air Force Band, and many, many others. And while these guest conductors were on campus, Al and Gladys would host receptions at their home for Purdue's academic deans and key top administrators to meet these outstanding musicians, thus raising the reputation of Purdue's bands in their eyes. It also enabled these administrators to relive their experiences in music. At one time, more than half of Purdue's deans and administrators had played in their high school or college bands. A shrewd move by Al. One of Al's most enduring legacies is this building in which we gather today. He was able to convince the band alum, James Stayter, to donate the funds to enable the construction of the Stayter Center of the Performing Arts. Truly one of the most unique band shells anywhere. James had played tuba in the Purdue band during the Spots era, graduated in chemical engineering, and went on to invent fiberglass. And he made a lot of money. And Al knew how to get it. A major new tradition which Al created was that of foreign travel. There were multiple trips to Colombia and Venezuela in the 1960s and 70s, the Japan World's Fair in 1970, a trip to Kerkrade in the Netherlands in 1974 for special marching and concert appearances at the World Music Festival held once every 4 years. And there was also a summer trip to the Canadian National Exhibition. But probably the most memorable events for the band members were the bold trips. Beginning with the 1966 trip to the Rose Bowl, Purdue's first appearance there. The entire group traveled to California by a special private train starting in Lafayette. When Al told the band staff that the train would depart on December 25th, one of them said, "But Al, that's Christmas." To which Al replied, "Well, it's Christmas in a sense, but it's when we're leaving." So be it. Following parade stops in Denver and Las Vegas and rehearsals on the UCLA campus, the big day began with the Turn of Roses parade and then on to the Rose Bowl. And being the master of impact that he was, Al had the entire marching band, more than 300 strong, file into the Rose Bowl Stadium single file and go all the way around the field for seats. Folks thought the line of band members would never stop. The halftime show was the famous circus show, the greatest show on earth, which completely outclassed the University of Southern California Trojan Band and garnered rave reviews from West Coast sports writers. Following the Rose Bowl, he also led trips to the Peach Bowl, Blue Runner Bowl, and the Liberty Bowl. But probably the most unique appearances for Al's Purdue groups were our performances in the stage shows at New York's Radio City Music Hall during 4 different summers, 1963, 66, 71, and 76, doing 4 shows a day, 7 days a week during the show's runs. During those 784 performances at the music hall, the band performed in person to more than 3 million people. For each of these runs, Al was a strict disciplinarian demanding nothing short of total dedication from the band. He issued fines for anyone who was late for a stage call and didn't accept anything less. I remember during the 1963 run, one of the band members showed up for a performance a bit under the weather from having had a few too many beers between shows at a pub down the street. Al fired him on the spot and had a replacement in New York the following day, ready to perform. It was my privilege to be part of these many adventures with the Purdue Band program as a student, staff member, and finally for 43 years as the announcer for the All-American Band. During all those years, Al was a great teacher and mentor to me and other members of the staff. He was a master showman, musician, and an inspiration to the thousands of students in the bands and orchestras who went through the program during his tenure. Those students all say their experiences in the Purdue Band were their most meaningful and memorable moments in their entire college experience. In closing, I'd like to share a few words by Hungarian composer and music educator Stayter, who said that culture cannot be inherited. The culture of previous ages will vanish unless each new generation wins it for itself again and again. Only that for which we have worked or even suffered truly belongs to us. Music will only enter our souls, live within us, if we plow our souls with our own efforts and make our own music. End quote. Truly, this refers to the remarkable life and achievements of my friend and colleague, Alfred George James Wright, Mr. Purdue Music.
Thank you, Roy. Al Wright was one of the most important mentors to me, many of the colleagues that I know preceded me, and to the many students that had the privilege of working in the bands under Al's leadership. His guidance and concern was for all his students and was shown by his dedication and his generosity. His commitment to his students was to develop them more than musicianship. It was to develop in them skills that would benefit them throughout their lives, skills like hard work, commitment to details, dedication, time management, and striving for excellence. He challenged his students to give their best even though the results weren't always what they or he wanted. He could motivate a band unlike anyone I've ever known. The sheer fact that his students would chant, "Al, stop the rain," when the weather turned bad is testimony of how his students revered him. These traits we all learned from Al Wright have proved to be guiding lights for all of us. We owe him such a tremendous debt of gratitude. One story Al shared with Henry Evans shows the lengths Al would take to teach his students valuable life lessons. The student was a young trumpet player who came to symphony band rehearsal late, which was unacceptable. But he was Al's best trumpet player. So Dr. Wright set out to teach the student a lesson. Al found out where the student's class was before symphony band and decided he would just wait for the young man outside the door. You can imagine the student's surprise when he walked out of his class and was greeted by symphony band conductor Wright. Dr. Wright escorted the student from class to the Hall of Music, where they both miraculously made it to rehearsal on time. Henry Evans asked Al what they talked about on that 20-minute walk to Elliott. And Al's response was, "Well, of course we talked about the value of being on time." Al Wright was a visionary and was considered a pioneer in the band profession. In 1961, he founded the National Band Association, or NBA. Serving as its founding president, eventually as secretary-treasurer, and then honorary life president. Al was eventually inducted into the very prestigious NBA Band Directors Hall of Fame at Troy University. In 1978, Al assisted former conductor of the United States Air Force Band, Colonel George Howard, in evolving the ABA John Philip Sousa Society, which eventually became the John Philip Sousa Foundation. With Wright's leadership, the John Philip Sousa Foundation dedicated its work to the promotion of international understanding through the medium of band music. Professor Wright served as the foundation's president, CEO, and chairman of the board. He was inducted into the prestigious American Bandmasters Association in 1949, with his principal sponsor being Henry Fillmore. Al served as ABA president in 1981, and one of the greatest honors of his life, he was selected as honorary life president of the American Bandmasters Association until his death. Al Wright also founded the United States Collegiate Wind Band, which gave students the opportunity to travel, playing concerts in various locations in Europe, including performances in Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, and Italy, under some of the nation's finest guest conductors. He held memberships in the Big Ten Band Directors Association, the College Band Directors National Association, the Music Educators National Association, and was a 4-year member of the Jury for World Music Festivals in Kerkrade, Holland. He guest conducted in almost every state and in countries around the world. I remember Al's last visit to the Midwest Clinic in Chicago, where he attended the annual Big Ten Band Directors Breakfast. Al was treated like royalty by his Big Ten colleagues. Graduate students from around the conference came up individually to speak with Dr. Wright, and the longtime Big Ten band directors came up to ask Al for a picture or a selfie. Al loved his time in the Big Ten, which he considered the nation's greatest band conference. He appreciated the close friendships he made throughout the years, but more than that, Al was considered one of the giants in the history of our conference. His legacy as the director of bands in the Big Ten will live for years and years to come. Al Wright's legacy at Purdue is a very special one, but his impact reached far beyond the West Lafayette campus. Band directors from around the world are indebted to Al Wright for his vision, his dedication to the band profession, and his willingness to take risks which would eventually benefit the entire profession in a powerful way. That's our beloved Al Wright. Gladys asked me if we could have this particular song sung today, because it was one that she remembers as a favorite of her mother's. It's very special to her family. This is I Come to the Garden.
I am
Over the past several days, I've gotten wonderful emails from colleagues around the country expressing their condolences to the Purdue band family and to Gladys and the Wright family. I'd like to read some of those to you today. It is indeed an honor to have been able to call Al a friend. I'm so very happy that Tracia and I were able to attend his 100th birthday party. As he was attempting to step onto the podium to conduct, he was having difficulty. And after a few unsuccessful attempts, he said to the front row, "This was easier when I was 99. He will be missed. Terry Austin." In 2011, we had Al and Gladys as special guests for the 4th time at the American Band College. Each conducted a march by longtime close friend Henry Fillmore with one of the ABC director's bands. As I drove them to the airport the next morning, I mentioned that I was now an orphan and was wondering if I could adopt them as my parents. Al said, "We'll need to give that some thought." 3 days later, I received a thank you note that began, "Dear son, yesterday I lost my other favorite dad, Max McKee." Max wrote a book entitled Band Stories, but band is spelled B-A-N-N-E-D. And there's a story as told by Al Wright about Henry Fillmore. In the early 1950s, while teaching at Miami High School in Florida, I got an invitation to direct my first masked band event. Having gotten to know Henry Fillmore very well and knowing that he had done many of these kinds of guest conducting appearances, I asked him to tell me how to do everything just right. Henry said, "I'll tell you what to do. First, you need to get a big, long, white baton. Then get a nice white uniform and big epaulets and a band director's hat with some scrambled egg insignia right here in front. Go out and buy a long white baton and be sure you have a podium where you can climb up and everyone will be able to see you. Now, you rap on the music stand a couple times, raise your arms and give an upbeat and shout, 'Go!' That's very important." So on the day of the rehearsal, I wore the new uniform, the band director's hat, and brought along my new long white baton. When I got to the stadium, I said to the custodian, "I need a podium." And he immediately returned, "What the hell is a podium?" And I told him it was something a director gets up on so the band can see him. Looking off field, he yelled, "Jay, back up your pickup truck over there." So he did and put the tailgate down so that I could stand on the very back of the truck right at field's edge. I jumped up with my white uniform, my special band director hat, and my long white baton, but then remembered that Henry told me to rap on the music stand a couple of times. Not having my stand on the bed of the truck, I looked around and thought, the cab of the truck will work great to get the band's attention. So I rapped loudly, tap, tap on top of the truck cab, and then yelled, "Go!" The man in the truck shouted back, "Yes, sir," and drove off. It was in 1927, and my band director wanted me to participate in a masked band show, so the next day we went out to the stadium and he marched us around. Since I was just a kid, I didn't know what the heck was going on. All of a sudden we were playing and there was a conductor up there, far away. Since we had a small band, they put us way in the back, but I noticed that the conductor was directing with one hand while the other arm hung limply at his side and swung back and forth. It's 2.5 years before I found out who that famous conductor was. So I'm one of the few people who played under John Philip Sousa. Al could still say that on his 99th birthday on June 23rd, 2015. To all, it is with great sadness that we learned of the passing of Al Wright this afternoon. This is indeed a tragic loss to the band community, as Al was instrumental in founding and supporting so many of our professional organizations, particularly the John Philip Sousa Foundation. He simply was a leader. We send our deepest sympathies and support to Gladys, Colonel Lowell E. Graham. Dear Jay, I'm sorry for your loss as well as that of the entire Purdue band family. Al was an amazing person and he had such an incredible influence on our profession. I'm proud that I was able to get to know him through the Big Ten and ABA. With my deepest sympathy, Mark Heidel, Director of Bands, University of Iowa. Dear Jay, I imagine that there are thousands of Al Wright stories and memories that have been activated with the death of our dear friend. I called Gladys yesterday and feel devastated for her. I am in Alberta, Canada, and with the borders closed, cannot be there to offer Gladys support. I hope that in these times there are many people who can be there for her. Be well, Marilyn Mann, another ABA widow. I have 65 years of memory to recount, but because I never thought I would have to write them down, this is not an easy task. Came to the Purdue band camp in 1956, a high school freshman from Hartford City. I was a terrible trumpet player and had to play in front of Professor Wright. I played a few notes and he stopped me and told me to move down 4 chairs. I could not believe that he knew how to place me 4 chairs down, but I found out. In the next 8 years, I saw him place everyone in their chair and get it correct. He never wavered, he just did it. That's what I remember most about him. He just did it. He never asked permission, he just did it. It did not matter how big the decision was or who it affected, he just did it. When I got to Purdue in the fall of 1960, there were already 2 trumpet players from my high school in band. Somehow I must have done something because Professor Wright knew who I was and called me out by my number, 72. A lot. That was one of the things I came to realize about him. He never called out anyone's name, it was always the number, and there were a lot of numbers. Later, as I got older, I became an officer, and in those days, the student officers pretty much ran the band within his rules. And there were several rules, and all of them made sense several years later. I was his executive officer in my senior year, and again learned a ton about how to do things. I was asking myself, how would Professor Wright want this done? I got called out fewer times, but when I did, I never forgot it. One time on a trip to Iowa, he and Gladys were not on the bus when leave time arrived. I gave the signal and we left on time. I was worried sick that I might be fired or worse when we got to Iowa. But when we did arrive, there he was waiting for us. When I got off the bus, he came over with that look you'll never forget and said, "Well, Henry, I'm glad you left on time. I would have fired you if you'd waited." And for him, it was always about the performance, not the way you got there. As I got older and became a high school football coach, I did exactly what Professor Wright taught me. I just did it. I got into some trouble, but not much, and that's when I knew he was correct. And I have modeled my life after him. Other than my dad, Al Wright was the most influential person in my life. How many times have I heard that's a personal problem directed at a student that was messed up many times? I continued to see him years after I left Purdue, and those wonderful dinners always came with some new message about how to deal with life. I'm going to miss him and all the great advice he gave me. There will never be another man like him, at least not for me. Rest in peace, Professor Wright. That's from Henry Evans. Jay, I was sorry to hear about the passing of Al Wright. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my first time traveling out of the country was on an American Collegiate Wind Band tour. I was in 10th grade and Gladys Wright was my director. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to honor Al. With sympathy, Rodney Dorsey, Professor of Music, Chair, Department of Bands, Indiana University. Hello, Jay. I just read your email shared via Emily Trinan. Please know that the Wisconsin band family is thinking of our friends at Purdue during this time. With this email, we send our sincere condolences as you mourn the loss and celebrate the life of Dr. Wright. What an incredible legacy he left after 104 years on Earth. He was a treasured figure in the band profession, and his legacy will live for generations. Dear Jay, thank you for sharing the news about Al's passing. Please accept my deepest condolences and warm wishes, Mallory Thompson, Director of Bands, Northwestern University. I have a message that I'm going to read on my phone that I received this morning from one of Al's former Golden Girls. This is what she writes. I'm reading about the many students whose lives were touched and molded by Professor Wright and Gladys. I can honestly say of the many people who entered my life, they had the most impact. It wasn't because either coddled us. No, Professor Wright demanded perfection. Don't drop that thing, he told me before one of my first performances. I'm still smiling about it. He expected promptness. To be on time was to be late. We were required to take responsibility for ourselves. That's a personal problem. Settle it outside of band. When in doubt, don't. Before away trips. The list goes on and on. Personal ethics and sense of community were formed for a lifetime. With that came pride in ourselves and our dedication to this program, school, and all who were part of it. And it lasts a lifetime, spreads through all tentacles of life. His passing does not diminish his legacy, but rather highlights the bright, shining star of his life. I will, however, miss the personal relationship we had and pray for Gladys to have strength. Rest in peace, my dear friend. June Siampalaco. And finally, from Colonel John Bourgeois, former director of the United States Marine Band. We celebrate the long and fruitful life of a giant, not a mere giant, but a titan, Al G. Wright. No one in American musical history has been as influential on the band movement as has Al G. Wright. From his early days in Miami as a young band director under the mentorship of Henry Fillmore, to his final days in the shadow of his beloved Purdue University, Al lived a life of unparalleled service to bands. He was the founder of the National Band Association, a co-founder of the John Philip Sousa Foundation, and a member of every relevant organization in the United States and around the world, and served as president of just about every one of them. He was the honorary life president of both the National Band Association and the ABA. Through the establishment of international tours, he gave thousands of young musicians the experience of travel and communication with diverse cultures around the world while representing the very best of American culture. I knew him both as a mentor and a great friend. And like most great leaders, Al and I were former French horn players. And we both agreed that when we stopped playing, the world was a better place. Though he lived more than a century, it would take eons for any of us to attempt to accomplish what he did in one lifetime. While retaining a slight British brogue and continental charm, Al was always the quintessential gentleman. He liked Southern Comfort Manhattans. His beef was well done and accompanied by a white Zinfandel. Perhaps Al's greatest achievement was winning the heart of his beloved own golden girl, Gladys Stone Wright. Al and Gladys were a formidable couple, and their legacies will live beyond their days. Al G. Wright, dear friend, you have blazed the trail for us to follow. And through your perseverance, you set the standard and the example. I know that you're up there organizing and directing a full band of angels and showing them how to do things the right way. Colonel John R. Bourgeois, United States Marine Corps Director Emeritus. Those are just a few reflections and amazing tributes to the incredible Al Wright. In closing, I'd like to say this. Today we've been remembering with love and gratitude a life that touched us all. I encourage you to help support and love Gladys and the entire family in the days and weeks and months ahead. Having lost my own wife several years ago, I know how difficult it can be to say goodbye to someone you love so deeply. For me personally, the only way I was able to move ahead was because of my faith and trust in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I ask those of you who are praying people to lift this dear family up in your prayers. Remember to bless each day and to live it to the full in honor of life itself and of Al Wright. entire Wright family, on behalf of Gladys, I'd like to thank you for being here today. This concludes our service here at Stayter Center. We'll be dismissing individual rows, and that we ask that if you plan to travel to the cemetery, that you make that known to our friends here from Solar Baker, and they'll equip you with appropriate flag.